I've decided to give the fancy car you bought to my parents. Mom and Dad are really happy about it. Can you believe it? But hold on, did you buy the car just to give it to them? Yep. That's the plan. Doesn't matter what you say now, the car's already bought. If you go against me, I'll divorce you. What? Divorce? In that moment, something inside me broke. Who's saying these things? Alright, I'll do it. My name's Rose. I'm 37 and work in an office. I live with my husband Jack and our daughter Lily, who just turned 7. Both Jack and I work, so money isn't a problem for us. Lily's growing up nicely. I'm happy in my own way, but I do have some issues with Jack. He's the type who puts his parents before his own family. It's nice that he cares about them, but sometimes he prioritizes them and our daughter over me. It's not pleasant. Even when I was in labor, I called Jack at work to tell him I needed him at the hospital because our baby was on the way. I'm sorry that my mom burned her finger. I have to go to my parents' house, he said. I couldn't believe it. How could he be more worried about his mother's minor burn than his wife giving birth? His mom had just touched a hot pan and got a small burn, but she was fine after cooling it down with water. I couldn't believe she called him for something so small, and I couldn't believe Jack rushed to her side instead of being with me during such an important moment. Jack is usually hardworking and kind to me, but his behavior towards his parents bothers me a lot. Another time, on our daughter's first birthday, his parents were visiting. They asked him to drive them somewhere, so he left without even celebrating our daughter's special day with us. He stayed at the hotel with his parents because they needed an extra room. It was shocking to me that he would prioritize a trip with his parents over being there for our daughter's first birthday. I felt really let down by Jack after that. This kind of thing happened a lot, but I couldn't just divorce him right away. I still love Jack, and I didn't want to take her father away from my daughter so easily. It's not like he doesn't care about her. He does care, so I hoped he would eventually put our daughter first. But since she was born until now, he's never celebrated her birthday with us. She's 7 now. He seems to think her birthday should be just for us. I try not to let her feel lonely. Once, I thought about inviting my in-laws to celebrate her birthday with us, but they said it would be too much trouble to come over. It's true it's a 2-hour drive from their place to ours, but Jack never minds the distance when he goes to see them. It feels selfish to say it's too much trouble to come here. My mother-in-law is so selfish. She openly admits she wanted me to have a boy, not our daughter. I told you I wanted a boy. Why didn't you listen? She says. I couldn't believe she'd say something like that. You can't choose the gender of your child, and I don't think it really matters if it's a boy or a girl. It's not like Jack's family is some famous lineage. It's just my mother-in-law's old-fashioned thinking. One reason Jack doesn't celebrate our daughter's birthday with us is because he's trying to please his mother. He's more concerned about his parents than anything else. He just can't seem to disobey his mother. When Jack took me to their New Year's family gathering, she said a lot of hurtful things to me. My mother-in-law seems to enjoy making me feel small. She criticizes me about not having a boy, but also about other things. She treats me like a servant, making fun of me in front of everyone. She even downplays my job, saying it's just data entry when it's actually engineering. I've tried to explain it to her, but she never listens. Plus, data entry is a respectable job too. I don't know why she looks down on it. I'm sure she can see our daughter, but she ignores her. She gives gifts to other relatives' kids during New Year's, but not to our daughter. And it makes me furious that Jack doesn't stop her. His daughter is being mistreated, and I feel like a fool being mistreated too. I don't get why he laughs at his mother's remarks. He even says, "My wife isn't much without me," trying to look good in front of everyone. I didn't want to take her father away from our daughter, so I tried to be patient, but my love for Jack started fading away. Then one day, Jack asked me for a favor. "I want to buy something," he said. "What is it?" I asked. "A car," he replied. I was shocked. Jack never cared much about cars or anything like that. "Why all of a sudden?" I asked. "I just thought it'd be nice to have something new, you know. I drive to my parents' house a lot, so I thought it'd be good to freshen things up. But we live near a supermarket. I don't drive much. I'm not into cars, so I thought you should decide. You'll be the main one using it anyway." Jack looked pleased and then added with a hint of apology. "Oh, one more thing. I'll choose the car and I'll let you pay for it." Jack wants a car for himself, but he can't afford to buy one on his own. He wants me to pay for it. Actually, my salary is what supports our family financially, and I don't expect Jack's salary to cover our expenses. When I was on maternity leave, Jack didn't contribute his salary to our household, so I went back to work right after giving birth. Luckily, I'm an engineer, so I arranged with my company to let me work from home. I work while taking care of our daughter. When she was little, I felt it was selfish of Jack to spend his leftover money on himself and then ask me to pay for a new car. But when he's in a good mood, he often helps out with our daughter, so I decided to go along with it. Okay, are you sure? I asked. Thank you, Jack replied happily, already looking at car catalogs and browsing the internet. We don't need a big car since it's just the three of us, I said. Yeah, I know, Jack mumbled in agreement. I wasn't sure if he was really listening as he headed to the car dealership. He chatted with the dealer from time to time. About 2 weeks later, Jack said he was ready to buy the car and took me to the dealership. He was so excited about it. I sat down and waited for Jack to tell me what to do. Suddenly, the dealer brought over a contract and showed us the car, a large luxury minivan. Oh my God, are we really buying this? I asked, surprised. Yeah, it's nice. I'm really excited, Jack replied enthusiastically. Wait a minute. I don't think we need such a big car. Maybe it's better to get something sleeker for the future, especially if we plan on having another baby, I suggested. But Jack insisted it was a good choice, which caught me off guard. Even if we do have another child, this car is too big for a family of 4. Are we really going to buy it? I asked repeatedly, feeling frustrated. Jack seemed annoyed. Why do you keep saying the same thing? You're making the dealer uncomfortable. You're the one who said, "Leave it to me," he argued. I did, but I didn't expect this, I replied. It's settled, Jack said, signing the contract. Then the dealer told us the price, which shocked me. I can't pay this all at once. We need to get a loan or something, I said. Fine, I guess I don't have a choice, Jack conceded. Jack insisted on signing the contract in his name, so we have to take out a loan. From then on, I would deposit the money into Jack's account and handle the payments for the car loan. That's how we ended up buying the car. When it arrived at our house, Jack was thrilled. Wow, it's so cool, he exclaimed. I thought, if it makes him happy, why not? But then something unexpected happened. One weekend, Jack had the car keys, so I asked him if he was going somewhere. Oh, we're going to my mom and dad's, he said casually. Okay, I replied. He was leaving our daughter behind again to visit his parents. Are you taking the car? I asked, and to my surprise, Jack happily said, Yes, I've decided to give the luxury car you bought to my parents as a gift. What? Mom and Dad are happy with it, I protested. Well, I'll drive you in it every time we go out, he reassured me. Wait a minute, you bought it as a gift for your parents in the first place? I asked incredulously. Yes, that's right, Jack confirmed. You're joking, right? You said you wanted it, so I agreed to buy it. If I knew from the start it was for your parents, I never would have agreed, I argued. Too late now. It's in my name, and I can do what I want. If you disobey me, I'll divorce you, Jack threatened. Divorce. At that moment, something inside me that had been holding me back collapsed. I had my issues with Jack, but I always held back from considering divorce because of our daughter. Even though Jack always prioritized his parents over us, I believed he still cared about his own family, me, and our daughter. But now, he was ready to cut us out of his life just to please his parents. How could he do that? Divorce? Who does he think he is? Fine, let's get a divorce, I said, my anger boiling over. What? I don't want you around anymore. Go back to your mother and father, mama's boy. I taunted him, hoping to provoke a reaction. Just as I expected, Jack's face turned red with anger. You're mocking me, are you? Fine then. Let's get a divorce right now. I'll go get the papers, he snapped, storming off to the city office. While he was gone, I started packing my things. I called my parents, explained the situation, and asked them to come pick me up. I told my daughter to pack her belongings too. Shortly after, Jack returned with the divorce papers. I've got them signed quickly, he said, handing them to me. His handwriting on the forms was so dark and angry. It looked like he had written them in a fit of rage. Without hesitation, I signed my part of the papers. Well, I'll file it, so why don't you just go? I said, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. I'm leaving even if you don't tell me to. You've been a terrible wife, Jack spat out, his footsteps echoing loudly as he stormed out. Why did I endure being married to someone like him for so long? If I had to do it over, I should have left him sooner. But there's no point in regretting today. I'm thankful that I finally have the courage to leave, and from now on, I'll do my best as a single mother. A few minutes after Jack left, my parents arrived. Together, we finished packing our things. Loading them into my parents' car, we headed home. In the meantime, I filed the divorce papers and my divorce from Jack was finalized. It was just a piece of paper, but as I submitted the papers and realized we were no longer officially married, I suddenly felt much lighter. Then I resolved to find a new place for my daughter and me to live together. About a week after Jack and I divorced, I went to my parents' house with our daughter. To my surprise, I found my ex-husband and his parents there. My mother quickly took our daughter to another room, sensing tension. Jack seemed agitated and started bombarding me with questions about the car insurance. "What's wrong with you? Why are you coming into our house like this?" I responded coldly, while his parents raised their voices in defense. My father, quietly angry, told them to leave. When they hesitated, he threatened to call the police. Frightened, my ex-in-laws fell silent. "Hey Rose, what's the deal with the insurance payments?" Jack persisted. I sighed. "Didn't you insist on putting everything in your name when you signed the contract? You bought the car and took out the loan, so you're responsible for the insurance too." My words shocked his parents. Jack had taken out the loan out of pride, insisting on owning everything himself. "Well, I never wanted that car in the first place. It's his problem now," his mother muttered. Suddenly, I realized why they were so frantic about insurance. Apparently, they had crashed the car into a guardrail while driving too fast. I hadn't noticed the damage when I arrived, but now it was clear. Since they didn't have insurance, they would have to foot the entire repair bill, including the guardrail damage. Repairing a luxury car would be costly, and I couldn't help but wonder how much it would set them back. In the end, my ex-husband and his parents returned the car and had to pay a hefty sum for the repairs. Afterwards, Jack bombarded me with emails begging to get back together. He even confessed they couldn't afford rent and utilities, so he moved back in with his parents. However, their relationship soured, especially since Jack was the one driving the car during the accident. Now he's stuck between his parents' harsh treatment and his own debts, unable to live independently. Despite all this, Jack still insists on seeing our daughter, but I refuse to allow it. It's too selfish of him. I ignore his emails and keep our new living situation a secret. My only concern was whether our daughter would miss him, but to my surprise, she seems perfectly content and happy in her new life. I'll continue to work hard to protect our daughter. Putting your parents before your own child and making your wife pay for everything while gifting the car to your parents, that's just unacceptable. Jack brought this upon himself, and he deserves it. I hope Rose and her daughter find happiness together.
My uncle, flushed with alcohol, echoed words that cut deeper than any knife. His sentiments found harmony in the nods and murmurs of agreement from the other men gathered around. Emboldened by the chorus of support, my husband unleashed a torrent of criticism, each word hitting its mark with precision. His satisfaction gleamed in his eyes as he reveled in the validation of his peers. I forced a calm facade, swallowing my humiliation and rage with each breath. Then, just as tension reached its peak, my mother-in-law rose from her seat, her gaze a force to be reckoned with. "Is that truly all you have to offer?" Her words pierced the heavy air, silencing the room in an instant. "My name is Emma, and I'm a 40-year-old woman working in a medical office. I met Tom, my husband, a man 4 years my senior, through our shared love of tennis. We've been married for 13 years. Though we both longed for children, fate had other plans, leaving a bittersweet ache between us. My in-laws, who live separately, keep a vigilant eye on us, especially my mother-in-law. Our bond is strong. We often enjoy lunches out and shopping trips together. Losing my mother at a young age made my mother-in-law's presence all the more significant. She embraced me with a mother's love, cherishing me as if I were her own flesh and blood. While our marriage initially thrived, over time, my husband's demeanor shifted. After about a decade, he became increasingly domineering. His once gentle kindness toward me evaporated. Moreover, his workload burgeoned, leading to frequent overtime and business trips. 3 years ago, he was reassigned to a different department, exacerbating our disconnect. He now spends half the week away from home. Upon his sporadic returns, his demands are curt and dismissive. "Dinner," he barks, or "Is the bath ready yet?" treating me as if I were merely a servant. Fed up, I once dared to voice my grievances. "You're not a child anymore. You should at least handle your own clothes," I protested. His response was chilling. "What nonsense is this? Your role is to obey me as your husband. Don't complain, you're my wife." For what felt like an eternity, my husband's accusatory finger jabbed the air, his voice rising in a crescendo of abuse. This ritual of verbal assault would replay whenever his mood soared, a relentless cycle I couldn't escape. His incessant nagging and troublesome behavior left me no choice but to acquiesce. Sitting at the dinner table one evening, I faced yet another onslaught of criticism. More vegetables again? Am I supposed to eat like a rabbit now? Get some meat on the table. You know your cholesterol's high. Reluctantly, I resolved to reduce the meat intake. But before I could speak, he rose abruptly, flinging the meal I had prepared onto the floor. "No one knows my body better than me. I'll eat out," I declared, but my words fell on deaf ears as he stormed out, wallet and phone in hand, slamming the door behind him. Every day, I scoured the internet for low-salt, low-meat recipes, desperate to accommodate his high cholesterol flagged in his company's medical checkup. Yet despite my efforts, it all seemed in vain. As I stooped to clean up the mess on the floor, a wave of desolation washed over me. 3 hours later, my husband returned, his tune merry, his senses dulled by alcohol. In resignation, I retrieved his coat from where he carelessly flung it, only to catch a whiff of grilled meat mingled with a perfume unfamiliar to me. Doubts that had lingered in the shadows of my mind surfaced with renewed intensity. I had suspected infidelity in the past, but lacking concrete evidence, I chose to suppress my concerns. Yet the distinct scent of that perfume fueled my suspicions like never before. From then on, whenever my husband's temper flared, he would vanish without explanation, returning home only to rush into the shower. Each time, the telltale fragrance lingered in the air, a haunting reminder that something was amiss. Soon his careless whistling in the shower would be silenced unless I confronted the truth lurking within his coat. Bolstered by my growing conviction of his infidelity, I resolved to gather evidence to confront him. 3 weeks later, on New Year's Day, we made our customary visit to my in-laws' home, where relatives congregated for the annual celebration. The table was adorned with a feast prepared lovingly by my mother-in-law, a colorful array tempting the senses. Amid greetings exchanged and well wishes shared, my husband's discontent simmered just beneath the surface. "Don't hold back, Emma. Dig in," my mother-in-law encouraged, to which I gratefully replied. Yet my husband's gaze bored into me with disapproval as I savored the meal, appreciating the effort put forth by his mother. "Where are the chopsticks?" His voice pierced the air, breaking the harmony of the gathering. Hastily, I fetched them from the kitchen, presented them to him, only to be met with another demand. "And the cups?" he queried, his irritation palpable. "Shouldn't she anticipate these things without being asked? You need to be more attentive to your surroundings," he chided, his words like barbs aimed at my every move. Despite the presence of our extended family, my husband's verbal assaults persisted. "I'm not a mind reader. You have to communicate with me," he insisted, his tone cutting through the festive atmosphere. Suppressing my frustration, I handed him a glass, which he accepted with a charming smile as he sipped the sake poured by our relatives. "Would you care for a drink, Emma?" my uncle kindly offered, but my husband interjected, "She's on chauffeur duty today," dismissing the gesture. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law and the other women toiled away in the kitchen, preparing lunch and attending to the needs of the men. Donning an apron I brought from home, I joined the flurry of activity, working tirelessly alongside them. While my father-in-law and the other men reveled in their merriment, consuming one bottle of sake after another, the sounds of their boisterous laughter filled the air. Expressing her sympathy for our busyness, my mother-in-law interrupted our tasks to offer us a respite, serving steaming cups of tea. As we sat together, engaging in light conversation, my husband's voice echoed from the living room, a reminder of the tension simmering just beyond our temporary sanctuary. "Let's spice things up with some honesty, shall we? A little stress relief for the new year," my husband proposed, to the delight of the gathered guests. "The loser of a round of rock, paper, scissors gets to spill the beans," he declared, his words slurred from alcohol. "That sounds like a riot," my mother-in-law chimed in, her interest piqued. Little did she know, I had my own agenda for this New Year's Eve gathering. As the game commenced with enthusiastic shouts, I seized the opportunity presented by my husband's unexpected suggestion. Retrieving something from my bag, I discreetly tucked it into my apron pocket. Amidst the raucous game, the losers vented their frustrations about work and bosses, met with sympathetic nods and murmurs of agreement. "It's all too true," the chorus of listeners echoed. Finally, it was my husband's turn to air his grievances, having lost the game of rock, paper, scissors. Anticipation and anxiety knotted in my stomach as I awaited his revelations. "My complaint is that my wife lacks attractiveness, and her cooking leaves much to be desired." My husband's words struck me like a bolt of lightning, leaving me reeling in shock. My father-in-law, clearly uncomfortable, hastily cleared his throat. "But when you two tied the knot, you couldn't stop praising her beauty and culinary skills," he interjected, attempting to diffuse the tension. "That was ages ago, Dad. Nowadays she serves up bland dishes filled with nothing but leaves like rabbit food." My uncle's demeanor darkened at the revelation. "It's unacceptable. As his wife, she should step up her game." His sentiments found resonance among the men present. Unbeknownst to them, I had dedicated countless hours pondering my husband's health and meticulously planning our meals. Yet their words flowed freely, oblivious to my efforts. Overwhelmed by a cocktail of embarrassment and fury, I longed to escape. As the conversation shifted to complaints about wives, my husband led the charge. "I toil away every day, yet my allowance remains unchanged. Stop your griping and obey me." My father-in-law chuckled in agreement, while the wives, downtrodden, remained silent. Then it was my husband's turn once more. "Everyone else is blessed with children," he declared, "but my wife is defective, incapable of bearing offspring." His callous words pierced me to the core, shattering the illusion of our marriage. The ache of unfulfilled dreams and the sting of betrayal weighed heavy on my heart, drowning me in a sea of sorrow and frustration. I inhaled deeply, willing the tears threatening to spill over to retreat. "It'll all work out, Emma." My mother-in-law's gentle grip on my hand offered a modicum of comfort. With a heavy sigh, she rose from her seat, her countenance dark with a resolve I hadn't witnessed before. "Is that all you've got to say?" Her unexpected outburst jolted the men, accustomed to her usual gentle demeanor. The once vibrant atmosphere fell into an uneasy silence. "Come on now, let's not ruin the fun." My father-in-law attempted to diffuse the tension, addressing my mother-in-law. "Fun? Are you the only ones enjoying yourselves here? You should have put a stop to this." My mother-in-law's voice trembled with righteous indignation. "Shame on you, speaking to her like that, labeling her defective. How dare you?" she continued, her gaze piercing. Yes, she's right." My father-in-law's troubled expression betrayed his discomfort as he averted his eyes. "We all have grievances to air," he conceded. "Exactly." The women, previously silent, erupted in support, their applause ringing through the room. "Let's not hold back. Speak your mind, and we'll all feel better." The words of my mother-in-law ignited a cascade of truth from the women, each expressing their grievances with newfound courage. "If you want more allowance, then earn more. Why not take initiative instead of expecting us to cater to your every need?" they demanded, their voices ringing with determination. As the wives confronted their husbands with precise criticisms, the men faltered, offering apologies in succession. Only my husband remained unmoved, his indifference palpable. "Why should I apologize for speaking the truth?" he retorted, locking eyes with Noah in a tense exchange. "I refuse to apologize, and I'll say it again. She's unattractive, a terrible cook, and incapable of bearing children." My husband's accusatory finger pointed squarely at me, each word a dagger to my heart. The dam of sorrow and frustration I had meticulously held in check finally burst, giving way to a tidal wave of rage. "You have no right to speak to me like that," I confronted my husband with a measured tone, my hand discreetly gripping the cell phone hidden in my apron pocket. "It's unfair that you're the only one allowed to vent. I have grievances too, you know, and you wouldn't object, would you? You've aired your complaints about me plenty of times. I'd welcome appreciation, but not baseless accusations." With a deliberate motion, I withdrew an envelope from my pocket, scattering its contents across the table where our relatives sat. The photographs revealed damning evidence: my husband entering a hotel room with another woman, then exiting her apartment, hand in hand. Bolstered by my suspicions, I had discreetly installed a GPS tracker in his car, providing irrefutable proof of his infidelity. Originally intended for a private discussion with my mother-in-law, the situation demanded immediate action. Guests filled the room as the truth unfolded, disrupting the once jovial atmosphere. Frantically, my husband attempted to gather the incriminating photos. Isn't it normal for husbands to stray? He appealed to the men for validation, but his plea fell on deaf ears. No one in the room offered agreement, leaving him isolated in his deceit. As my uncle, once a supporter of my husband, denounced infidelity with a resounding "No, that's unforgivable," the other men nodded in solemn agreement. Yet my husband remained defiant. "You lot couldn't even dare to stray from your wives," he taunted, his laughter hollow and bitter. My uncle, spurred into action by my husband's audacity, rose from his seat. "Who truly bears the shame here?" he challenged, echoed by murmurs of concurrence from the men, their gazes piercing through my husband's facade. Despite his attempts to maintain a facade of strength and righteousness, my husband's demeanor reeked of desperation, leaving me repulsed by his arrogance. With resolve, I confronted him once more, armed with further evidence. "A week ago, I received a call from Maruka-san, your newfound love," I revealed, each word laden with the weight of betrayal. "She claimed you've been seeing each other for 3 years now." My husband's feeble attempts at denial only served to betray his guilt. "She even mentioned your subordinate, and the fact that she's 7 months pregnant," I continued, unmasking the deceit woven into his web of lies. "She pleaded for a divorce, stating that you refused to acknowledge the child." Fearing my reaction, his protests dissolved into stammered excuses as I extracted my phone from my apron pocket, placing it on speaker for all to hear. "Maruka-san, did you hear what I just said?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sorrow. Through stifled sobs, her response came quietly but unmistakably. "Yes," she confirmed, her words carrying the weight of truth, shattering the illusion my husband had meticulously constructed. In fact, the day before New Year's, I had reached out to the girl, informing her of my intentions to call her the next day. Seeking insight into my husband's true intentions, she had agreed, and thus, I made the call just before confronting him. Overhearing the conversation, she was overcome with tears and fury. "He told me to wait until our divorce is finalized," she lamented, her voice trembling with betrayal. "I never uttered such words. Surely, as my wife, you understand, don't you? Why would I say such a thing?" "You're the one who betrayed me," my husband countered, his gaze falling to the ground in shame. "I'll never forgive you," she declared before abruptly ending the call, her trust in my husband shattered. Presenting the divorce papers I had prepared, I demanded his signature, only to be met with a storm of fury. "Absolutely not. I can't simply sign this on a whim." "How dare you, sis? Besides, after all this, you'll owe me 2 million yen in alimony." "No, I refuse to divorce you. I simply don't have that kind of money," he protested, his demeanor devolving into childish petulance as he stamped his feet in protest. Witnessing my husband's unprecedented display of immaturity, I nearly chuckled, but remained resolute in my demand for divorce and alimony. "Tom, you're not a child. It's shameful." My mother-in-law's frustration with his pitiful behavior was evident as she scolded him with an exasperated expression. "You can't just refuse divorce and alimony. Face reality with dignity," I pressed on, my tone unwavering. "It's not that simple, Mom. Dad, you understand how I feel, right?" My husband appealed, seeking validation. "Absolutely not. I can't condone your actions." My father-in-law's response was firm, leaving my husband with little recourse. Reluctantly, he signed the divorce papers and agreed to the alimony, his tears held back only by sheer willpower. Believing this gathering to be the opportune moment to expose my husband's infidelity, I pushed him further. "Oh, by the way, I've terminated our lease at the end of the month. One home should suffice for you, shouldn't it?" My words were met with applause from the women and deep sighs from the men, and my husband left my in-laws' house, seemingly fleeing from the attention of everyone present. The next day, they filed for divorce at the city office and relocated to a rental apartment I had already arranged. Additionally, I sought 1.5 million yen in alimony from my ex-husband's unfaithful partner. It would have been a harsh blow for the girl, having quit her job upon learning of her pregnancy. But forgiveness was out of the question. After losing his apartment, my ex-husband sought refuge with the girl. Promptly, he acknowledged paternity upon divorce. However, she eventually severed ties, demanding 1.5 million yen per month in child support. Moreover, my ex-husband resigned from his job following the scandal's exposure, making it untenable for him to continue with the company. Left abandoned by his parents and unable to secure a new job, My ex-husband resorted to sleeping in internet cafes and juggling part-time gigs to meet his alimony obligations. Susan, my former mother-in-law, confided in me about his deteriorating health, citing elevated cholesterol levels and the toll his self-indulgent lifestyle had taken since our divorce. Interestingly, Susan and I forged an unexpected friendship post-divorce, growing closer than ever before. Now I find solace in the tranquility of my life, relishing the peace that comes with solitude.
My name is Maria Dalton, and I am about to turn 27 this year. I've been married to my husband for 5 years now, and we have a son named Martin who just turned 4. Initially, after tying the knot, I worked as a full-time employee, but now I'm working part-time at the same company. My husband is 3 years older than me at 30. I was initially swept off my feet by Kevin Carlton's passionate gestures, which ultimately led us to date and eventually get married. However, Kevin's demeanor shifted after marriage, revealing a more domineering side that I hadn't seen before. Kevin's sister, Jane Dalton, who is 20 years old, seems to hold a special place in his heart, perhaps due to their significant age gap. Before our marriage, I didn't pay much attention to their dynamic, assuming they got along well. However, after tying the knot, I started noticing changes in Jane's behavior. Jane frequently drops by our house unannounced, expecting to be catered to regardless of the time. She never brings any gifts or shows any appreciation during her visits. Instead, she acts as though I'm invisible, addressing only Kevin with a casual "brother, I'm here again." Despite my discomfort, Kevin always accommodates Jane's demands, even if it means inconveniencing me. For instance, during dinner, Kevin invites Jane to eat, leaving me to scramble and make do with what's available, regardless of my prior preparations. When I express my concerns to Kevin, he brushes them off, insisting that I should accommodate his sister. Kevin's preferential treatment towards Jane is evident, and it often leaves me feeling marginalized and disheartened. Despite Jane's verbal apologies, her actions suggest she revels in Kevin's attention at my expense. Left to fend for myself during meal times, I'd often resort to leftovers, resigned to the fact that I'm on the lower rung of Kevin's priorities. This pattern repeats when Jane requests a private conversation with Kevin, prompting me and Martin to relocate, once again highlighting my secondary status in our household. As Martin and I finish our meal and head to the kitchen for cleanup, I can't help but feel the weight of Kevin's favoritism and Jane's entitlement, casting a shadow over our family dynamic. I find Kevin and Jay chatting happily on the sofa, ignoring the dishes left untouched on the dining table. Their negligence toward cleaning up suggests they see me not as a wife or sister-in-law, but more like a maid. They don't acknowledge Martin either, treating him as if a maid brought her child to work. While I'm cleaning up in the kitchen, about to take a bath with Martin, Kevin loudly calls me, despite the late hour nearing 8 p.m. He demands that I buy a cake for Jay immediately, specifying where to get it, despite the inconvenience it poses to Martin's bedtime. Jane adds to the pressure, insisting she wants it now, and Kevin rushes me, displaying his frustration at my hesitation. Knowing I'll inevitably have to go, I reluctantly agree to buy the cake, aware that a shop near the station closes at 9 p.m. As I prepare to leave, I overhear Kevin and Jane's conversation, criticizing me loudly, questioning why Kevin married me. Reluctant to leave Martin behind, I bring him along. While getting him ready, I hear Kevin's threatening tone from the living room, causing Martin to sense the tension, even if he doesn't understand the words. Suppressing my emotions, I ask Martin what kind of cake he wants, and he brightens up, expressing his preference for a fruit-loaded one. Our trip to the cake shop becomes a momentary escape from the conflict, as Martin excitedly discusses cake flavors. We reach the shop just before closing time, luckily finding the cake Jane wanted. I buy 2 cakes, including the fruit-loaded one for Martin. Returning home, I serve the cakes to Jane and Kevin, then prepare Martin's cake. However, before he can enjoy it, Jane demands it for herself, and Kevin, disregarding Martin's protests, sides with Jane, claiming his right to choose. Unable to contain my frustration, I expressed my dissatisfaction, prompting Kevin to threaten divorce. Martin, visibly distressed, holds my hand tightly, and after some consideration, he speaks up, expressing his love for strawberry cake, a preference he mentions while eating the cake Jane initially wanted. I feel like I've been subjecting Martin to too much. 3 adults, including myself, shouldn't be burdening a 4-year-old child like this. The moment I saw Jane reaching for Martin's cake, after hearing him express how delicious it was, I knew I had to intervene. "Martin, let's go over there," I said, leading him to another room so he could enjoy his cake in peace. Kevin, likely noticing Jane's attempt to take the cake, apologized to her for seeming stingy. As much as I wanted to retort, I held back, not wanting to expose Martin to talk of divorce. Watching him innocently eat his cake, with a smile on his face, was heartwarming and offered a moment of solace amidst the tension. After finishing the cake, ignoring both Kevin and Jane, we decided to have a late bath and sleep in Martin's bed. The next morning, I woke up to find Jane had already left. As I prepared to wake up Kevin and Martin for breakfast, I heard Martin crying and rushed to him. To my shock, I found his piggy bank, a gift from my father, broken, and all his saved money gone. It was part of his nightly ritual to say goodnight to the piggy bank, and last night was no different. At that time, the only people in the living room were Kevin and Jane. I asked Kevin about it, and he casually mentioned that Jane needed some money, so she took it from Martin's piggy bank, ignoring his tears. As I held Martin, feeling his pain so deeply, I couldn't help but cry with him. It hurt to see Kevin prioritize and care for Jane over our own son. I felt a surge of anger and sadness, unable to bear the sight of Martin in such distress. "Why are you making the morning so miserable? I feel awful," Kevin exclaimed. "Don't you think you've done something wrong? Martin is crying so much for the first time since we got married." I expressed my anger towards him. Kevin looked at me intensely, then went to the bedroom without a word. He returned with something in his hand, divorce papers. "If you're not happy with me, then let's divorce," he said, thrusting the papers at me before leaving the house with a loud bang. Martin, who had never cried over issues with Kevin and Jane before, must have reached his limit. He's been crying since last night, and I can't bear to see him in such pain. "Hey, Martin, should we skip daycare today?" I asked, trying to comfort him. He seemed happy at the idea of spending the day with me, replying with a loud yes and showing me a faint smile. As he brought a picture book from the shelf and sat on my lap, looking up at me with happiness, I couldn't help but think that his little heart must be full of patience. Today, we'll take it easy. I made a decision to fill Martin's heart with as much joy as possible. While I might be causing some inconvenience at my workplace, my colleagues kindly understood the situation and granted me a day off, encouraging me to spend quality time with Martin. In the morning, we went to the park where we played hide and seek, laughed in the sandbox, and gleefully slid down the slides. Returning home for lunch, Martin seemed drowsy, a rare occurrence for him. Normally, he can nap by himself, but today he fell asleep on my lap, reminiscent of his baby days. Instead of tackling household chores while Martin napped, I decided to cherish this special moment and be comforted by his peaceful sleeping face and gentle breathing. As I drifted off myself, a noise from the entrance jolted me awake. It was too early for Kevin to be home, so I felt a sense of unease. Quickly, I gathered Martin and only essentials, hiding in the bedroom closet. My heart raced as I heard footsteps approaching. Then, a familiar voice echoed through the house. It was Jane, trembling with fear. I listened as she rummaged through drawers, muttering about something she couldn't find. After a brief call to Kevin, Jane left, locking the door behind her. Emerging from the closet, I put Martin back to bed, pondering what had just transpired. I couldn't shake the feeling that Kevin was involved somehow, and I began to question his actions. Feeling a mixture of disgust and fear towards Kevin, I hastily packed essentials for Martin and myself. By the time Martin woke up, I was ready to go. "Martin, let's go to Grandpa's place," I said, and we headed to the station, taking a train to my parents' house. Thankfully, my parents' home was nearby, and we arrived quickly. Although I hadn't informed them beforehand, they'd welcomed us with open arms, sensing something was amiss. Their pet dog immediately brought joy to Martin, and they played together happily. Feeling relieved, I confided in my parents about the unsettling events with Kevin and Jane. We discussed the possibility that Jane may have been searching for my belongings, particularly my cash cards. Reflecting on my mother's insight, I remembered my successful experience in launching an online shop for handmade goods with my friends. Before getting married, I was well known in the handmade industry, serving as the CEO of my own shop. As the business flourished, I made the decision to tie the knot. However, my priorities shifted towards raising my child, prompting me to entrust the company to my reliable friends until I settled into parenthood. Although I still hold the CEO position, I primarily work part-time from home, managing the company remotely. Surprisingly, my husband, Kevin, is unaware of my continued role as CEO, although he knows about my previous position and suspects that I've saved a decent amount of money. I've intentionally kept details about my CEO status and savings from Kevin, mainly due to his poor financial habits. Despite earning a substantial income, Kevin spends recklessly, leaving little for essential expenses. He allocates a mere $200 per month for food, insisting I become a full-time homemaker. However, I've never agreed to abandon my career entirely. Eventually, he allowed me to work part-time, but not without making me sign a post-marital property waiver, fearing I might consider divorce. Since Martin's birth, I've solely relied on the $200 food budget, using my savings to cover Martin's nursery fees and clothing expenses. I've never asked Kevin for additional financial support, leading him to assume I have substantial savings. Jane's sudden need for money aligns with Kevin's belief in my savings, likely prompting their search for my cash cards. Nevertheless, I've been quietly setting aside funds for Martin in a separate savings account. Each month, a portion of my salary is deposited directly into this account. Despite their efforts, they won't find my cash cards, as I always carry them with me, concerned about Jane's frequent visits and Kevin's allowance of them. I've decided to keep my valuables at my parents' house, storing them securely in their safe. Martin's distress over his broken piggy bank further raises suspicions. My father, visibly angered by Martin's plight, insists on contacting Kevin. However, my mother advises caution, suggesting we uncover their intentions before they fabricate excuses, potentially complicating matters further. Deciding to record their conversation, my parents, a lawyer friend, and I agreed to discuss the situation calmly before taking any further action. Upon arriving home, I began preparing dinner as usual when Kevin returned. Quickly, I started recording on my phone, discreetly keeping the screen facing down to avoid detection. To my surprise, Kevin immediately asked about my cash cards upon entering. When I inquired about his sudden interest, his responses were evasive, hinting at deceit. Remaining silent seemed to frustrate Kevin, and he grew somber, demanding all my part-time earnings for his sister. Firmly, I explained that the money was for Martin's savings, not to be diverted elsewhere. Angered by my refusal, Kevin shoved divorce papers from his bag towards me, accusing me of draining his finances and devaluing our son, Martin. His words struck a nerve, prompting me to cease dinner preparations, gather the divorce papers, and take Martin's hand, heading for the door. Kevin's threat of divorce echoed behind me, but I declared I wouldn't return to a home where strangers came and went freely. Reflecting on my words later, I questioned if I had been too harsh, especially considering Jane's relationship with Kevin. Ignoring Kevin's flurry of messages and calls, I turned off my phone and sought refuge at my parents' house. Upon arrival, I shared the recording and divorce papers with my parents. Their response was clear. I should do what was best for Martin, even if it meant divorcing Kevin. However, they acknowledged the potential emotional toll it could take on Martin. As I grappled with this decision, Martin expressed hunger, and my mother swiftly prepared his favorite meal, hamburgers. Tears welled in my eyes as Martin, with a heart full of kindness, shared his happiness with us. Overwhelmed by his gesture, I couldn't contain my emotions, and my father reassured Martin that my tears were of joy. Martin's innocent remark about Jane's absence brought forth more tears, and I embraced him tightly. Witnessing this exchange, my father's eyes mirrored my emotional turmoil, highlighting the weight of the situation on our family. I turned to Martin and remarked, "Isn't it wonderful to be with family?" His surprise was evident as he questioned whether Dad had only considered Jane as family. My father gently affirmed that, indeed, it was just us: Mom, Grandpa, Grandma, and Martin. Then he asked Martin if he wanted to stay with us as part of our family. With a laugh, Martin replied, "Of course. We're family," bringing smiles to everyone's faces. As we enjoyed our meal, filled with laughter and lively conversation, I couldn't help but wonder when was the last time we had such a natural, joyous gathering. Despite my contemplation of divorce, the happiness of the moment convinced me to go through with it and inform Martin. Although discussing divorce weighed heavily on my heart, Martin seemed to understand, expressing his happiness at living as a family. He eagerly embraced our pet dog, referring to him as his younger brother, despite the dog being older. Preparing for the divorce, I swiftly contacted a lawyer, arranging to meet the next day. That night, Martin slept peacefully with my father and the dog, their faint laughter offering comfort. As I laid in bed with my mother, memories of my childhood flooded my mind, lulling me to sleep. The next day, I was inundated with over 200 calls and messages from Kevin, showcasing his emotional turmoil. Exhausted by his instability, I turned off my phone once more. Meeting with the lawyer, we formalized the divorce proceedings. The lawyer explained that Kevin had become entangled in Jane's substantial debts, using my savings as a solution. Despite Kevin's attempts to reconcile, the divorce had been finalized. Later, I received a call from Kevin, his tone markedly different, devoid of aggression. He confessed to spoiling Jane and feeling jealous of Martin. Despite his plea for reconciliation, I remained resolute in my decision. Returning to my parents' house, I decided to stay until Martin grew up. Meanwhile, I resumed my role as company president, explaining the situation to my colleagues. Subsequently, Kevin and Jane were disowned by their parents due to their debt and the divorce, now living in a cramped apartment, constantly blaming each other. However, despite their turmoil, I found solace and happiness in being with my family.